You don't live here anymore. You have no home with us. That's what my sister Madison told me in front of our parents, as if I was nothing more than an unwanted guest. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Evelyn. I'm a writer, or at least I've been trying to be. For years I scraped by, waiting tables, freelancing, doing whatever I could to keep myself afloat. But life hit me hard all at once. I lost my steady gigs, my relationship ended, and the bills kept piling up. With no other choice, I swallowed my pride and called home. Madison, the perfect daughter, the lawyer, the golden child, answered. She was cold but agreed I could stay for a little while. Just temporary, she said. 3 months. I told myself it would be fine. I packed what was left of my life into a few bags and returned to the house I grew up in. It didn't feel like home anymore, but I held on to hope that maybe, just maybe, being with family would help me get back on my feet. But things didn't stay quiet for long. Madison had rules for me, and our parents stood by silently. Every day felt like I was being judged, weighed, and found lacking. Then one morning she called for a family meeting. I walked into the dining room, nervous but trying to stay calm. Mom sat at the table, eyes down. Dad stood by the window, arms folded. Madison was already at the head of the table, like she owned the place. She spoke like it was business. This arrangement isn't working. You've overstayed what was supposed to be temporary. I reminded her I was applying for jobs every day, that I was trying. She cut me off with that polished, clipped tone she always used in arguments. Then she stood and placed a small cardboard box in front of me. Inside were scraps of my life. My toothbrush, a sweater, a notebook, a picture frame. She didn't even flinch when she said it. You don't live here anymore. You have no home with us. I looked at my parents, desperate for someone to stop her. But Mom avoided my eyes and Dad just sighed. My chest felt hollow. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I just picked up the box, walked to the door and left. In that moment I thought I had finally hit rock bottom. Growing up, it was always clear who the favorite was. Madison was the star of the family. Straight A's, captain of debate team, polished and confident in every way that made our parents proud. She was the type of girl you'd see on a college brochure, smiling with a perfect future ahead of her. Mom and Dad bragged about her to their friends at every chance. Her grades, her internships, her law school admission. Every wall in our house had some certificate of hers in a shiny frame. And then there was me, Evelyn. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was different. I loved to read and write. While Madison thrived in structure, I got lost in stories, scribbling in the margins of my textbooks, forgetting assignments because I was too busy creating characters in my head. My parents never said I was a disappointment, but their silence spoke louder than words. You live in your head too much, my mom once told me, shaking her head at a notebook full of stories I had worked on. Dad would sigh, not even looking up from the paper when I asked for new pens or journals. The only one who ever saw me for who I was, really saw me, was Grandpa Walter. He was my mom's dad, quiet but full of warmth. He loved stories as much as I did. He never published his writing, but he carried notebooks full of ideas and memories. When I was little, he'd take me on long walks around the neighborhood, spinning tales as if the world itself was alive. You've got something, Evelyn, he would say, tapping my notebook. Most people skim the surface of life, but you dive deep. Don't ever let anyone tell you that's wrong. For my 10th birthday, he gave me a leather journal with my name written inside. That gift meant more to me than anything Madison ever earned. He encouraged me to write, to keep going even when no one else cared. I can still remember the way he'd sit at the kitchen table, glasses perched on his nose, reading my stories out loud, asking me questions like I was a real author. Madison would walk by, smirking, and mutter, "Still pretending?" Grandpa never let her words sting too deep. He'd smile and tell her, "Better to pretend you're a writer than pretend you know everything." That was the spark of the quiet war between us. Madison couldn't stand that Grandpa gave me attention she couldn't win. And when he died during my sophomore year of college, it felt like someone had ripped the last piece of safety out from under me. Madison gave a flawless eulogy. I couldn't even speak. After the funeral, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Guess now you'll finally grow up." But I didn't grow up that day. I broke. And the crack between us never healed. When I finally moved back home after years on my own, I told myself it would only be temporary. Just a reset. 3 months at most. Madison had made it sound simple when she agreed over the phone, but the second I walked through the door, I realized the house wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. There was no hug, no, "Welcome back, Evelyn." Instead, Madison handed me a typed sheet of rules like I was some tenant moving into her apartment. No guests. Be out of the common areas by 10. Contribute $300 a month for utilities. Clean your bathroom twice a week. Keep noise down during my Zoom calls. She didn't even look at me while reading it off. My parents didn't say a word either. Mom just fiddled with her coffee mug and Dad muttered something about keeping things peaceful. I was too drained to argue, so I nodded and dragged my suitcases upstairs. My old bedroom wasn't mine anymore either. Boxes lined the walls, and the bed creaked under weight it wasn't meant for. It felt less like coming home and more like sneaking into storage. The days blurred quickly. Madison carried herself like the landlord, always checking what I was doing, always ready with some cutting remark. If she passed me working on my laptop, she'd smirk. "Still on your little blog?" At dinner, Mom would casually suggest I apply at Madison's firm, just something stable for once, while Madison rolled her eyes. Dad mostly stayed silent, but silence hurt just as much. I tried. I really did. I applied for jobs, sent out resumes, pitched freelance gigs. Every rejection email made the air in that house heavier. To help with money, I took on remote editing gigs and even helped a local bookstore with their newsletter. When I shared that at dinner, Mom wrinkled her nose. "So, marketing for books no one reads?" Madison laughed softly, like it wasn't even worth commenting on. Every corner of that house reminded me I didn't belong. I scrubbed the kitchen, cooked meals, kept to myself, but it never counted. Madison always found something wrong. The thermostat was too high, I made too much noise, I wasn't moving fast enough with my life. I thought coming back would give me a chance to breathe. Instead, it felt like suffocating in a place that used to feel safe. And slowly I started to realize I wasn't their daughter, their sister, their family anymore. I was just a guest overstaying my welcome. The tension in that house built up like steam in a kettle. Madison never raised her voice, she didn't need to. She cut me down with clipped remarks and that calm, superior tone that made me feel like a child sitting through a lecture. Every small thing turned into a problem. One night, I nudged the thermostat up to 72 because the house felt like an icebox. 20 minutes later, Madison stormed in, arms folded. "Are you kidding me? We don't need to heat the whole house just because you can't handle a little chill." I looked up from my laptop, trying to stay calm. "It's not like I set it to 80. I was freezing." "You don't think about the bills you're not paying," she shot back. The words hit like a slap. I was paying what she asked. I cleaned, I cooked, I contributed. But none of it mattered. To her, I was a burden. "I'm trying," I said, my voice shaking. "You act like I'm some freeloader. I've applied to more jobs this week than." "Then what?" she snapped. "Then writing another sad story no one will read? Evelyn, your life is excuses wrapped in creativity. Nothing more." For a second the room spun. I stood, pulse pounding in my ears. "You don't know the first thing about how hard I've worked just to survive." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Survive? You're back here, living under a roof you don't own, mooching off people who actually have goals. Don't talk to me about survival." That was it. The line that cut deepest. Years of swallowed hurt rose up all at once. "You've hated me since we were kids," I said, voice breaking. "Because Grandpa believed in me, not you. That's what this has always been about." For the first time her mask cracked. Just for a moment her eyes widened. Then just as quickly she smoothed it over with a smile. "You're delusional," she said softly. "This isn't about Grandpa." She took a step closer, her voice dropping into something colder. "I'm done arguing with you. We'll settle this tomorrow." "Settle what?" I asked. "There's going to be a family meeting." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "It's time we make things clear." I stood frozen in the kitchen, shaking with rage and fear. The way she said it, it wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. Deep down I already knew what was coming. The next morning the house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels staged. When I walked downstairs, the dining table was bare except for 3 glasses of water and a single notepad. Mom sat stiffly, her hands folded tight. Dad leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. And at the head of the table, of course, was Madison, poised, calm, dressed like she was about to argue a case in court. "Sit down, Evelyn," she said, her voice smooth, professional, rehearsed. My chest tightened as I slid into the empty chair. No coffee, no breakfast, no small talk. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. Madison folded her hands neatly. "We've been talking," she began, glancing at Mom and Dad as if they were her jury, "and it's clear this arrangement isn't working. You were supposed to stay temporarily, but it's been 2 months with no meaningful progress." "That's not true," I blurted, my voice trembling. "I've been applying for jobs every day. I've picked up freelance work. I've done everything I said I would." Madison didn't blink. "You've brought tension into the home. You've refused help. And you continue to act like a victim." Her words made my stomach twist. "Refused help? You mock everything I try to do." She stood then, slow and deliberate, and walked into the living room. When she returned, she was carrying a small cardboard box. She set it down in front of me as if presenting evidence. Inside were my things. My notebooks, a pair of shoes, my phone charger, even my toothbrush. "You don't live here anymore," she said, her voice steady, final. "You have no home with us." The words sucked the air from the room. I turned to Mom, begging silently for her to say something, anything. She kept her eyes on her glass of water, blinking too fast. Dad rubbed his temples and finally muttered, "It's for the best, Evelyn." "For the best for who?" I whispered. No one answered. I looked at the box, my life reduced to scraps shoved into cardboard, and felt something inside me collapse. I wanted to scream, to throw it across the room, but all I did was stand. My hands shook as I picked it up. "You planned this," I said quietly. "All of you." No one moved. No one denied it. I walked to the door without looking back. When it clicked shut behind me, I realized I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving the family I thought I had. Standing on that porch with a box of my belongings, I finally understood what it felt like to be erased. I spent that night in a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind with buzzing fluorescent lights, scratchy sheets, and walls so thin I could hear the couple next door fighting over frozen pizza. I lay on the bed fully dressed, arms wrapped around that stupid cardboard box like it might disappear if I let go. My mind felt blank, almost numb. I kept circling the same thought: they really did it. They actually kicked me out. I hadn't checked my phone all day. I didn't care to. But when the motel Wi-Fi finally connected, I forced myself to glance at my inbox, hoping maybe for a job offer or even a kind message from an old friend. What I found instead stopped me cold. The subject line read, Walter Hayes Trust. Immediate attention required. My heart jumped. Walter Hayes. My grandfather. I blinked, half convinced it was spam, but I opened it anyway. The email was from a law firm I'd never heard of, signed by an associate named Erica Davis. It said, "Dear Ms. Evelyn Hayes, we are reaching out regarding a matter related to the estate of your late grandfather, Walter Hayes. A provision in his trust has recently triggered legal review due to your current living circumstances. Please contact our office immediately to discuss next steps." I read the words 3 times, my hands shaking harder each time. A trust? My grandfather left something for me? Why hadn't anyone told me? The next morning, I called the number in the email, sitting on a bench outside a coffee shop with my heart pounding like it wanted to break through my ribs. Erica answered, her tone warm but steady. "Evelyn, thank you for calling back. We've reviewed the terms of your grandfather's trust, and there are 2 key provisions." She paused before continuing. "First, a residential property deeded solely in your name, located in Forest Hill. Second, a fund allocated specifically for your creative work." I sat there in stunned silence. "I'm sorry, what?" She repeated it carefully as though I hadn't heard right. "A house. A fund. Both mine. Why now?" I asked, voice thin. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me?" "The trust was sealed," Erica explained. "It had conditions. One was that it could not be activated unless you were removed from your family home without consent. That condition has now been met." I pressed a hand over my mouth. My chest ached. Grandpa had known. He'd seen this coming, seen Madison, seen my parents, and built a safety net only for me. For the first time since leaving that house, I didn't feel erased. I felt chosen. A week later, I was standing in front of a small 2-bedroom bungalow in Forest Hill with a set of keys clutched in my hand. The place wasn't fancy, peeling paint on the porch, shutters hanging a little crooked, roof in need of work. But it was mine. My name was on the deed. No conditions, no rules taped to the fridge, no sister watching over my shoulder like a warden. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of dust and pine, like the house had been holding its breath, waiting. The floors creaked beneath me, not unkindly, just alive. It felt old but steady, the kind of place that could hold secrets without judgment. For the first time in years, I exhaled without fear of someone watching. That first night I didn't have furniture. I laid a blanket on the wooden floor, used a borrowed pillow, and curled up beneath a leaky ceiling that ticked with the sound of dripping rain. It should have felt lonely, but it didn't. I lay there staring up at the cracked ceiling and thought, this is mine. No one can take it away. The fund Grandpa left wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to patch the roof, repaint the walls, buy a second-hand desk, and replace my old broken laptop. Enough to breathe. For once, I wasn't calculating how many shifts I'd need to cover rent or skipping meals to pay for ink. I set up my desk by the front window where the morning light poured in, warm and steady. I stacked my notebooks beside it, opened the new laptop, and felt something stir inside me that had been silent for too long. My voice. I began writing again. Not cautious little drafts I hid from people, not polite stories I thought my parents might approve of. I wrote about the silence at that family meeting, about carrying my life in a box, about being erased in my own home. The words came like water breaking through a dam, raw, unpolished, but true. Each day I added a little more. Painted the living room pale blue. Planted herbs by the porch. Cooked in the tiny kitchen and actually tasted the food because no one was waiting to critique it. Slowly, piece by piece, I built a life that belonged to me. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. And after everything, that was enough. Day by day, the little bungalow began to feel less like a house and more like a home. The walls still carried faint cracks, the floors still groaned under my steps, but none of it bothered me. It was my space, my rules, my air to breathe. And in that space something shifted. I started to feel strong again. I poured myself into my writing. At first it was just messy pages about anger and shame, about being boxed up and pushed out like I was disposable. The words were jagged and raw, but for once I didn't stop to polish them. I didn't write to impress anyone. I wrote to finally say what I'd swallowed for years. Then I sent one of the pieces out, almost on a dare, to myself. A small literary journal I admired was accepting submissions. I told myself not to expect anything, that it would probably be rejected like so many things before. But a month later I opened my email and froze. Congratulations. We're pleased to accept your piece for publication. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking. This wasn't a paycheck from waiting tables. This wasn't Madison's approval. This was mine. Proof that my voice mattered, even if my family never believed it did. I printed the email out, taped it to my fridge, and stood there staring at it like it was a window I had finally managed to open. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. I worked mornings by the window, afternoons fixing up the place, evenings reading with a cup of tea. Some nights I walked around the neighborhood listening to the quiet. I didn't need my parents' silence anymore. I didn't need Madison's approval. For the first time in my life I wasn't chasing belonging. I was building it. The anger I carried started to cool into something steadier. I still thought of the night they boxed me up, how my parents' silence cut sharper than Madison's words. But instead of breaking me, the memory fueled me. Every rejection I'd endured, every remark that I was a failure, it all went into the pages. And the pages finally were giving something back. I wasn't erased. I wasn't invisible. I was becoming exactly what they swore I never could be. Someone who survived without them. Someone who could stand on her own. It was late one evening when the past came knocking. Literally. I was at my desk editing a new draft when a sharp knock rattled the front door. My stomach tightened before I even stood up. Hardly anyone knew my address. When I opened the door, there she was. Madison. She looked exactly the same, polished, put together, standing on my porch like she owned it. But her eyes flicked over the chipped paint and faint smell of fresh coffee drifting out. And for the first time, I saw a crack of uncertainty in her. Evelyn, she said, her voice lower than usual, almost rehearsed. We need to talk. I gripped the edge of the door. You've made it pretty clear you don't need me at all. What could you possibly want? Her jaw tightened, but she pushed forward. Mom and Dad, things aren't great. They think you've poisoned Grandpa's memory. They're upset about the house, the money. They don't think it's fair. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Fair? After they let you box up my life and throw me out? After they sat there in silence while you erased me? She flinched at the word erased. For a flicker of a second her mask slipped. That wasn't, she started then stopped. She steadied herself. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came to ask if you'd be willing to talk to them. Smooth things over. They're hurt. I stepped onto the porch, close enough to see the faint lines of tension at the corners of her mouth. They're hurt? You carried my notebooks out in a cardboard box like trash. You told me I had no home. And now you want me to fix their feelings. Madison didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her confidence unraveling inch by inch. Finally, she muttered, I didn't think Grandpa would actually leave you something. I thought it would go to all of us. There was the truth. I shook my head slowly. He knew. He knew you'd try to take everything. That's why he made sure you couldn't. For the first time in my life, I watched Madison lose her composure. Her lips pressed tight, her shoulders tense, like she had no line prepared for this moment. You should go, I said quietly. This house isn't yours. And neither am I. Her eyes burned into mine, but she didn't argue. She just turned, walked down the porch steps and disappeared into the night. I stood there in the doorway, the cool air wrapping around me. For years, I had dreamed of Madison's approval, of my parents' recognition. But now, as the door shut behind me, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had already chosen myself. Weeks passed after Madison's visit, but her words clung to me like shadows. I half expected my parents to show up next, or for some letter to arrive demanding I do the right thing and hand everything over. But the silence stretched on. No calls, no knocks, no apologies. First it stung. I caught myself checking my phone, waiting for a text from Mom asking if I was eating, or Dad leaving a voicemail about the leaky faucet like he used to. Nothing came. It felt like they'd erased me a second time, this time by pretending I didn't exist at all. But in that silence, something else bloomed. Peace. I began to see it clearly. Their approval had always been a moving target. Madison had always been the golden one, the untouchable. I could have twisted myself into anything, lawyer, doctor, corporate puppet, and it still wouldn't have been enough. The box on the dining table proved that. One crisp morning, I sat by the window in my little bungalow, coffee warm in my hands, and reread the journal that had published me. They wanted more pieces. Other magazines had reached out too. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was being heard. I thought of Grandpa then, of the way he used to press books into my hands and whisper, "Stories outlive us all." He hadn't just left me money or a house. He left me proof that I wasn't invisible, that someone had seen me for who I was and believed I was worth fighting for. I closed my laptop, stepped outside and let the sunlight touch my face. For the first time, I wasn't defined by who had abandoned me. I was defined by what I was finally becoming. Free. Was stepping away from my family the right move, or should I have tried once more to mend things? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear them. And remember to subscribe and turn on the bell for future stories.